After the meeting between American President Donald Trump and the new president of Syria, Al-Shara, news emerged that could signal a fundamental change in the situation in the Middle East. In particular, there is news that Israel and the new Syrian authorities have recently held direct talks. This was reported by an Israeli source, which indicates a change in the dynamics between former enemies as Israel expands its military presence in Syria. In this episode, we will discuss the secret negotiations between Syria and Israel, which recently took place in Azerbaijan. We will discuss with you the meeting between Donald Trump and Al-Shara, and how much could all this change the situation in the Middle East. A little spoiler could change things significantly, because Syria has suddenly started turning away from Russia very strongly and is now building very powerful alliances, primarily with Saudi Arabia. My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is May 16th. Before we begin, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like this episode, and be sure to leave a comment so that YouTube's algorithms promote this episode and as many viewers as possible can see it. Also, please subscribe to my Telegram channel, Peachy News. You can find the link in this video's description. There we promptly publish news as soon as it becomes available. So now let's go over everything step by step. Israel and the new Syrian regime recently held direct talks, which indicates a change in the dynamics of relations between the two countries. The talks took place in Azerbaijan. The head of the operational department of the Israeli Armed Forces, Major General Oded Basyuk, participated in them. Basyuk met with representatives of the Syrian government in the presence of Turkish officials. The acting president of Syria, Ahmad Al-Shara, stated last week that his government is conducting indirect negotiations with Israel to put an end to its attacks on Syria. As he said, in order to prevent the situation from reaching a point where both sides lose control. Interestingly, in Damascus, there has been no comment so far regarding reports of direct negotiations with Israel. The only statement was from Al-Shara himself, saying that there had been indirect negotiations. The Israeli source is not revealing the meeting's topic or the mediator, but Turkey was likely the facilitator. And the first report about the meeting was the Israeli 12th channel. Let me remind you that this week United States President Donald Trump met with Shara, a former jihadist who, by the way, was recognized as a terrorist by the United States in 2013. The meeting took place in Saudi Arabia, and Trump promised to lift the sanctions imposed against the regime of Bashar al-Assad. Let me remind you, Assad was overthrown as a result of an uprising led by Shara and fled from Syria in December. He is now in Russia. The White House stated that Trump called on Shara to take a number of measures, including normalizing relations with Israel, expelling foreign and Palestinian terrorists, and providing United States assistance in preventing the resurgence of Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. But the key point here is that the sanctions will be lifted if the new Syrian government agrees to normalize relations with Israel. Well, after the fall of the Assad regime, Israel, as you know, seized more territory in Syria and carried out several attacks which, according to them, were aimed at preventing the restoration of military potential and eradicating militants who could threaten Israel's security. Initially, Israel's movement into Syrian territory was described as temporary, but since then officials have stated that the military will remain there for an indefinite period. Israel also declared a buffer zone in southern Syria with the stated goal of protecting the Syrian Druze minority. Israel also, I remind you, occupied the Golan Heights, which it seized from Syria in the War of 1967 and later annexed. Right away, I am addressing Israeli viewers. I call the Golan Heights occupied according to international law. You may dispute this, you may disagree, but according to international law, these territories are considered occupied. That's why I use proper names for things. And the United States Department of the Treasury stated on Thursday that yes, it is indeed already working on Donald Trump's directive regarding sanctions against Syria and intends to implement the necessary authorizations that will be crucial for attracting new investments to Syria. The message on social media added that the actions of the United States Department of the Treasury could help restore Syria's economy, financial sector, and infrastructure, and could set the country on the path to a bright, prosperous, and stable future. United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio explained that the United States will make an exception to the sanctions against Syria and is not lifting them completely yet. Next is his quote. As we move forward, we hope that soon or one fine day we will be able to turn to Congress and ask it to lift the sanctions completely. The Trump administration hopes to eventually lift the exemption, since the prospect of sanctions being reimposed every 6 months is a deterrent for investment. Decoding. So the Americans are saying, we are lifting the sanctions, but every 6 months we review our decision. If the situation gets worse, we reinstate these sanctions. If everything is normal, the situation remains as it is. Recently, an Israeli official reported that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu requested Trump to maintain sanctions on Syria. He stated that he fears this could lead to a repeat of the events of October 7th, 2023, when Hamas-led militants attacked Israel. Well, and here I'll remind you a bit about the United States sanctions against Syria, because Syria's economy has in fact been paralyzed for years by Western sanctions. And among the harshest is the so-called Caesar Act, adopted by the United States in 2019, which imposed large-scale sanctions restricting the economic activities of certain individuals, companies, governments, and so on, who assisted the military efforts of Bashar al-Assad. The law made the entire Syrian economy, as they say, untouchable. In other words, no one could enter, invest, or do anything there. It was total isolation. And according to the World Bank, the country's economy shrank by more than half over 10 years, from 2010 to 2020. After the Sharia law was introduced in 2019, the economy there collapsed. According to the World Bank, as of 2022, poverty affected nearly 70% of Syria's population. In 2022, extreme poverty affected more than 1 in 4 Syrians, the bank reported, adding that this figure likely worsened after the earthquake in February 2023. And now the countries of the Persian Gulf are interested in investing in Syria. That is, they understand that it's a great opportunity to invest money there and they can make a profit from Syria. Because, look now, if the new Syrian regime really keeps its promises and tries to put the country on the right track, then someone has to rebuild all of this. The destruction there is just unreal. Someone will have to rebuild it. Accordingly, for this, investments are needed, companies need to come in, and so on. And the countries of the Persian Gulf, primarily Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the Emirates, really want to do this. They want to get involved there, but they are very afraid of violating United States sanctions. That's why the actions of Donald Trump remove such barriers, opening the way for potentially just billions of dollars in investments. That's exactly why Saudi Arabia Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman insisted so much that Trump meet with Al-Shara. According to the White House, Trump suggested during the meeting that Shara normalize relations with Israel, among other measures. And Syria's return from such an isolated position gives a lifeline to the Al-Shara regime, which, let me remind you, last year when it took power in Damascus, promised that the armed opposition in Syria would eventually form a government defined by institutions and a council elected by the people. But this also gives an opportunity to the Arab states of the Persian Gulf and Turkey, who have also insisted on lifting sanctions, to expand their influence in Syria and benefit from it after a decade of absence from this country. The fact that Trump did this so publicly from Riyadh, I think, is a kind of tacit approval for those who also want to invest in Syria. This means that Trump essentially gave a victory to Mohammed bin Salman. In Syria, opinions vary about this. Some say it's great and that they're coming out of isolation. For example, the Syrian currency, the lira, grew by 27% against the United States dollar in just one day. Right after Donald Trump announced that they would be lifting sanctions from Syria. Well, right now, first of all, of course, these are greater opportunities for Saudi Arabia, which, by the way, will also insist that Syria normalize relations with Israel. Because for decades, the Arab states of the Persian Gulf have stayed away from Syria, because their main rival, Iran, has been expanding its influence in this country through an alliance with the Assad regime. This civil war in Syria seriously worsened relations between Damascus and most Arab states, which ultimately led to Syria's expulsion from the Arab League. And in recent years, the countries of the Persian Gulf have begun to establish relations even with the Assad regime. and they led efforts for his rehabilitation until he was suddenly removed from power in December of last year. Well, since then, it has been Saudi Arabia and Qatar that have doubled their efforts to reintegrate the new regime into the international community. Well, for example, the Saudi Arabian Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farhan stated that Riyadh will be at the forefront of Syria's economic revival. His efforts could enable him to become a major player in the country and expand his influence there for the first time. As Farhan stated, quote, "Syria will not be alone. Saudi Arabia will be at the forefront, supporting this economic awakening of Syria. Syria needs a push, and it will get that push from its brothers in the region." That is, as you understand now, of course, the countries of the Persian Gulf have basically received the green light to enter Syria, to turn it into a proper country, and of course to profit from all of this. The Persian Gulf countries have no interest in the Syria-Israel conflict. Therefore, most likely they will really try to normalize relations. Plus, Washington will insist on this as well. I'll leave it at that for now. Let's see what comes out of this. Share your opinion and conclusions in the comments under this episode. Subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and don't forget to like if you want to support the work of this channel.